welcome back to my channel. In today's video we'll see how to complete this implement cloud security fundamentals on Google Cloud. So this is a challenge lab and you get 1 hour 30 minutes to complete this challenge lab. In this challenge lab we'll be creating a custom security role, then we'll create a service account, then bind the IAM security roles to a service account. Later we'll create a private Kubernetes engine cluster in a custom subnet and then deploy an application to a private Kubernetes engine cluster. So these are the tasks which we are going to perform in this lab. So let's start the lab. Now the lab is started. Open Google Cloud Console. Log in with a student username and password. So let's proceed with task 1. Create a custom security role. Your first task is to create a new custom IAM security role called Orca Storage Editor that will provide the Google Cloud Storage bucket and other object permissions required to be able to create and update storage object. Before starting the task 1, let's export some variables. So here I'll be exporting the custom security role. So this role we need to create. So this name I will be setting here. Next, service account. So we need to create the service account as well, and the cluster name. Only I'm setting the variables. So these variables we will be using it when we are executing these commands. So that time we will be making use of this. So the cluster name, VPC name, subnet name, jump host name and the zone, all these variables I will be setting. So let's copy this. Activate Cloud Shell. You can click on this and open this in new window. So here I will be executing that. So now it is set. Before creating the security role, let's set the zone. So by executing this command gcloud config set, in the compute zone we are setting it to Europe West 1-C. So zone details you can find it here. So here they are mentioned for all tasks in this lab, use the Europe West 1 region and Europe West 1-C zone. Before you start the task, ensure that you read this challenge scenario. So where the resource has to be created, they will have mentioned here. So in that zone only we need to create these resources. So for me it's Europe West. So I'll be copying this. Now it's updated. Next I will be creating a role definition.yaml file where I will define this custom security role and the permissions for that security role. So here I will be including the permissions storage buckets get, so storage objects get. So these are the permissions which I will be giving it to this security role. So here let's copy paste this. Post that we need to execute this command gcloud IAM roles create and the security role name. Then you need to pass this project ID. So in which project we are creating the service account, that we need to specify here. Then we need to pass the file, this role definition.yaml file we need to pass, so that it picks the permissions and it assigns those permissions to the security role. So let's copy this. You should get this output created role. So it has created this role and to this role it has assigned this permission. So all these permissions have been added to this specific role. Once that is done, you can click on check my progress and this should be complete. So we have completed the task 1. Let's proceed with task 2. Create a service account. Your second task is to create a dedicated service account that will be used as the service account for your new private cluster. You must name this account Orca private cluster. So we will be creating a service account that will be used by the cluster. So let's create that. For that we will be executing this command gcloud IAM service account create and the service account name. So here I have defined it, the name of that service account. So this is the one, it will be referring to this name. So this is the one. You ensure that you replace that environment variables with the names which you get in your lab. And this is a private cluster service account. So that display name I am setting it here. So let's copy this, execute it here. can click on check my progress. Now this is complete. Let's proceed with task 3. Bind a custom security role to a service account. You must now bind the cloud operations logging and monitoring rules that are required for Kubernetes Engine Cluster service account as well as the custom IAM role you created for storage permission to the service account you created earlier. So in task 3, we'll be binding the custom security role to a service account. For that, we'll be executing this command gcloud projects add IAM policy binding. Since we are binding the IAM policy, we need to execute this. Let's copy this command. Execute it here. So now this is complete. So we have binded the custom security role to the service account. Now let's proceed with task 4. Create and configure a new Kubernetes Engine private cluster. You must now use the service account you have configured when creating a new Kubernetes Engine private cluster. The new cluster configuration must include the following. The cluster must be called Orca Cluster 539. The cluster must be deployed to the subnet Orca build subnet. The cluster must be configured to use the Orca private cluster 117 SA service account. So this service account we have already created it. Next, the private cluster options enable master authorized networks, enable IP alias, enable private nodes and enable private endpoint must be enabled. So we need to enable these options. Once the cluster is configured, you must add the internal IP address of the Orca jumpsuit compute instance to the master authorized network list. So these are the things which we need to perform. First, we need to create a cluster and it should be deployed to the subnet called this. For that, we need to execute this command gcloud container cluster create, and the cluster name we are passing here, and number of nodes will be 1. Master IPv4 CIDR range, we are specifying this CIDR range here, and the network name. Under network name we are passing the VPC name. So you can find that VPC name here. So we need to create in this VPC Orca build -VPC, so that we are passing here, and the subnet as well, subnet name. So they have specified which subnet to use. So I am passing it as Orca build subnet. Then we need to enable master authorized networks. So this needs to be enabled. So this, and then enable IP alias private, enable private nodes and enable private endpoints. So all that we need to pass here. So under master authorized networks, I'm passing this IP address, enable IP alias, enabling the private nodes and enable private endpoint. So all this flag I'm passing it here since all this needs to be enabled for this cluster. Then I'm specifying the service account here. It will use that service account and add it to this cluster. And zone is very important. We need to specify the zone in which this cluster needs to be created. So let's copy this command. Execute it here. Now the cluster is created. Here you can see the name of the cluster and the location, IP address, machine type, node version, number of nodes, and the status of this cluster is running. So here you can find the details of the cluster. So you can click on check my progress. So now this is complete. So let's proceed with task 5. Deploy an application to the private Kubernetes Engine cluster. You have a simple test application that can be deployed to any cluster to quickly test that basic container deployment functionality is working and that basic services can be created and accessed. You must configure the environment so that you can deploy this simple demo to the new cluster using the jump host Orca jump host. Make sure to properly install the gcloud auth plugin before running any kubectl commands. So let's first SSH to the jump host. So from jump host only we need to deploy that application to the cluster. So that's why first we need to SSH into this jump host, and this jump host is in that zone. So let's copy this command. Type S. You can just enter. So here you can see we are connected to Orca jump host, and on this host it has created this home directory. Now let's set the compute zone to Europe West 1-C. So since we have connected to jump host, we need to set the zone again. We are not in the Cloud Shell, we are on the jump host. So let's copy this command, go back to Cloud Shell, execute it here. Now it has updated this property. Next we need to execute this command gcloud container clusters get credential, and the cluster name you need to pass here Orca cluster 539. This is a cluster which we had created, and then we need to pass the internal IP here. So let's copy this command, execute it here. So we are generating a kube config on this. Now we can see kube config entry generated for this cluster. So you have to, like, whenever you are performing any operations in the cluster, you have to ensure that you execute this command to set the kube config. So once that is done, we will be installing this Google Cloud SDK GK Cloud Auth plugin. So this plugin is required to use the kubectl command on that instance. So let's copy this. If you want to continue, you have to type S. So now it's installing that plugin. Now the installation is complete. So you should get this message without any warning or error. Once that is done, we'll be creating the deployment by the name Hello Server, and we will be using this image so that you can find it here. So you need to execute this command kubectl create deployment hello-server. This is a deployment name, and we are making use of this image. So the samples we are using. So you can copy this and execute it here. So you should get this message deployment hello server created. So when you execute this command kubectl get deployments, it will show this hello-server. You can also describe this. You can execute this command kubectl describe deployments. So it will describe the deployment for you. This deploys an application that listens on port 8080 and that can be exposed using a basic load balancer service for testing. Next we need to expose this deployment. So for that we need to execute this command kubectl expose deployment and the deployment name, and this is the service name. Orca Hello Service is the service name, and under type you need to specify the load balancer, and port you have to give 80 and target port will be 8080. So now we are exposing our deployment to this service. You can execute this command. Now this has been exposed. You can click on check my progress. This should be complete. We have deployed an application into the cluster, so this is complete now. And if you want to check the cluster details, you can go to Kubernetes engine. So here under Kubernetes engine page under clusters you can find the cluster. So this is the cluster which we had created. If you click on workloads, so under workloads you can find this hello-server. So this is the one which we have deployed, and you can find the status of this as OK. So if you click on this, you can find more details about it. So here you can see the details about this, and here you can find the endpoints. So if you click on this endpoint, you should get this message hello world version 1.0.0 hello server. This output you should get. You can also execute this command kubectl get services and copy this IP address, paste it here and provide the port number. So this way also you can access that. So once you complete all the tasks in this lab, you can click on end lab. After completing this challenge lab, you will be getting this skill badge implement cloud security fundamentals on Google Cloud, and you will also receive some points for completing this lab. If you face any issues or difficulties completing this challenge lab, please let me know under comment section. I will be happy to help. If you found my video helpful, please like and subscribe to my channel and stay up to date with the latest content on this channel. Thank you all for watching. See you in the next video.